People are often afraid of hitchhikers, but there are scarier things out there. I was trying to leave Harvey, North Dakota, and head south for the winter. I had been working on farms in North Dakota, but most of that work was ending because it was late fall. I needed to get all the way to Florida for the citrus season, but I had more time than money. So I made a sign that said south and stood by State Highway 52. Interstates are usually better because truck drivers sometimes pick up hitchhikers. They can be bored and are often less afraid of strangers than regular people driving their own cars. Knowing I might be waiting for a while, I sat down and leaned back with my sign propped up against my feet. After some time, a terrible smell filled the air around me. It came and went, but when I could smell it, it was very strong. I looked around to see where the smell was coming from. All I could see was the empty road and some trees set back from the highway. There were no dead animals or anything else that could explain the odor. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, but then the wind must have shifted because I smelled it again, even stronger this time. I had been hitchhiking for a long time and knew when it was best to move along, so I decided to walk further down the road. The trees lined this part of the highway, but I didn't pay them much attention just yet. It was early afternoon by now. I had started my journey at 11, leaving the motel where I had spent the night in Harvey. I didn't want to start too early since I had paid for the room, and the morning was quite cold. I carried my backpack and held my sign as I walked south along the road. Not many cars had passed by, and none of them had stopped to give me a ride so far. I kept moving, hoping my luck would change soon and that someone would pick me up and help me on my way to Florida. Finally, I set my pack down again and leaned against it, thinking I had moved far enough away from the terrible smell. For a few minutes, everything seemed fine, and I began to forget about it. But then the smell returned, even stronger this time. It was a foul, stinking odor like something rotten and dead. I couldn't understand how the smell had followed me. I looked around and saw the same things as before, the empty road, the trees, and the grass. There were no dead animals or anything else that could explain the awful smell. It was very strange and made me feel uneasy. The road was still empty, and no cars had passed by for a while. I knew I had to keep moving if I wanted to get to Florida. So I picked up my pack and sign again and continued walking down the highway, hoping to leave the smell behind for good. This time I decided to walk even farther. I would keep going until I reached the next town if I had to. As I walked, though, the terrible smell stayed with me. It didn't go away, and I started to feel really nervous. How could a smell follow me? I began to really hope that a car would stop and give me a ride soon. After an hour or so, I couldn't walk anymore. My legs were tired, and I needed a break. I sat down and tried to relax, but all I could think about was that awful smell. It was like it was stuck in my nose, and I couldn't escape it. As it started to get dark, I still couldn't see anything that could be causing the smell. The thought of spending the night in the woods made me anxious, especially with whatever was making that terrible odor nearby. I kept looking toward the woods, hoping to see something that would explain the smell, but also hoping I wouldn't see anything too scary. Just as the sun was going down and the shadows were growing longer, I noticed something. 2 red dots appeared in the darkness of the woods. They looked like eyes, staring at me from the shadows. My heart began to race. What could it be? The eyes seemed to watch me, unblinking, making me feel very uneasy. I wished more than ever that a car would come by and take me away from this strange and frightening place. I jumped up, grabbed my pack, and started walking again. I didn't think I had the energy, but I was moving fast. Each time a car passed, I waved my arms wildly, hoping someone would stop and help, but none of the cars stopped. They probably thought I was acting strangely. As I walked, I kept glancing at the woods, but now I couldn't see anything unusual. Finally, I was so tired that I had to stop and rest. I was exhausted, both in my body and in my mind. The smell was still there, but it was faint enough that I wondered if I had imagined it. Just then I looked toward the woods again. There were the red dots staring back at me, but this time it wasn't just the eyes. I watched as a creature began to step out of the shadows. Above the eyes, I saw antlers, huge antlers like those on a big old buck. Then I noticed the rotting flesh hanging from its face, which looked like a skull. The creature's body was mostly bones, with bits of decomposing meat clinging to it. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to figure out what to do. I wanted to run, but I was too tired to move. I knew I couldn't stay there, so I forced myself to stand up. With all the strength I had left, I started walking again, hoping to find safety and get far away from the strange creature. The creature stood on its hind legs, which looked like the legs of a deer. But it was much taller than any deer. It was huge, about 9 or 10 feet tall. The most terrifying part was its skull, which had a terrible grin. The eyes, glowing like red laser beams, stared right at me. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the ground. Besides, there was nowhere to go. I realized this creature had been following me all day. Now that it was out of the woods, the awful smell was stronger than ever. It made me feel sick to my stomach, and I thought I might vomit. The stench was so overpowering that I wasn't sure if I could even move. The creature took a step toward me, its bony body creaking with the movement. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I knew I had to do something, but I was frozen with fear. All I could do was watch as it came closer and closer. I felt like giving up. I was sure that creature would come out of the woods and harm me, maybe even eat me. It kept walking toward me slowly, grinning and dropping bits of flesh like a zombie from a movie. Its face was blank and evil at the same time. Suddenly, the highway lights near us went out, just blinked off. The moon was just a tiny sliver, and the nearest house was so far away I couldn't even see it. It was dark, really dark. I couldn't see the creature at all except for its red eyes, but I could still smell it. It wasn't making any sound at all. I couldn't hear it walking, even though I knew it was getting closer to me. I forced myself to stand up and started to stumble toward the nearest streetlight. I knew the creature was still following me, but I didn't know how close it was. Then I heard the sound of tires on the highway. I didn't care anymore. I knew this could be my last chance to get away, so I stumbled out onto the highway. I saw the headlights, bright and blinding. I wanted to lie down and give up, but I reached my arms up and the truck miraculously saw me. The driver pulled off the road and stopped. He rolled down his window, but before he could say anything, I yelled, "Something's chasing me! Let me in, please!" He sniffed the air for a second and said, "The Wendigo! Get in, quick!" I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the truck and he sped off, leaving the creature behind. I've got to tell you about something incredible that happened while I was working a few weeks ago. I fly drones for a job, not the military kind, though. My drones are high-tech machines used for studying the environment, like mapping changes in the coastlines up in Nova Scotia, Canada. It's a pretty unique job, and I get to explore some really remote places that not many people see. One time I was near Digby along the Bay of Fundy. The tides there are amazing. They go up and down like 50 feet twice a day. On that particular day, I was out on the rocks controlling my drone. Everything seemed normal. Birds were flying around. My drone was buzzing in the air, and the water was moving as it always does. Then something caught my eye on the monitor. At first I thought it was a glitch. You know, like when the screen acts up for a moment, but this thing was definitely moving, and it wasn't a seal or a fish. It looked longer with these spiky ridges along its body. I squinted at the screen, trying to figure out what it could be. Then when I glanced up, I saw it out in the water, closer to the shore than I expected. This creature looked like it came straight out of a movie. Its scales were shiny and dark, shimmering under the water as it swam effortlessly against the strong tide. I've seen seals, otters, even sharks in these waters. But this was different, like a dinosaur or a reptile, with claws that looked sharp enough to cut through rocks. It was long, maybe longer than a kayak, and its eyes seemed keenly aware of everything around it. I'm not an expert on mysterious creatures, but I've heard stories from old fishermen about sea serpents and such. I never really believed them until that day. Whatever this thing was, it had a presence that made my heart race. Standing there on the rocks with my drone controller, I couldn't help feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. But I stayed put. Curiosity is a powerful thing, right? So I cautiously maneuvered the drone closer, trying not to startle it. Though why I thought it could hear me over the crashing waves, I don't know. It just felt like a moment I had to capture. The drone's camera was rolling, and I couldn't help thinking, this could be the shot that everyone talks about, the one that goes viral. It feels like I've been watching this creature swim for hours, even though it's only been a few minutes. Then, something unexpected happens. Instead of diving down or swimming away, it starts to float differently. It's hard to describe, but it almost looks like it's standing up in the water. Not like a person standing, but more like its upper body rises above the surface. It has a long neck and a head that swivels around, checking out the shoreline. It reminds me of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. My hands are sweating as I carefully control the drone, trying not to make any mistakes. The creature just stays there, scanning the shore as if it's searching for something or maybe someone. I can't help but think, I hope it's not looking for me. Because honestly, if that creature had started moving towards me, I wouldn't have known what to do. There was no way I could outrun it, not with those slippery rocks and the tide rushing in. But it didn't come closer. Instead, it gracefully sank back into the water, almost like it was trying to vanish without a trace. I stood there, my heart pounding loudly in my ears, staring at the spot where it had disappeared. I half expected it to reappear, but the water just returned to normal calm waves rolling in as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The drone continued to record, capturing the empty sea while I stood frozen in place. It took a while for my mind to decide it was safe to move again. Finally, I gathered my courage, reeled in the drone, and packed up my equipment. I glanced around one last time just to be sure, but everything seemed peaceful. I hurried back to my truck, constantly checking over my shoulder, scanning the shoreline. There were no surprises, but the feeling of being watched lingered. It wasn't until I was securely inside my truck, doors locked, that I finally released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands trembled a little as I started the engine, and I admit I was quite shaken by the whole experience. The drive back to town feels like it passes in a flash. My thoughts are racing faster than the truck's wheels. All I can think about is what I witnessed. Part of me tries to explain it logically. Maybe it was an unusually large fish or a species scientists haven't discovered yet, but deep down, I know it wasn't something ordinary like that. I've seen big fish before, like sturgeons, but they don't have eyes that seem to peer right into you. When I finally get home, the first thing I do is lock the door, though I know a lock wouldn't stop a creature like that if it wanted to get in. It just makes me feel safer. I head straight to my computer, plug in the memory card from the drone, and there it is, the footage clear as anything. There's no mistaking what I captured. It's right there on the screen, not just in my memory. I sit there for a long time watching the video repeatedly. It's mesmerizing, almost like I expect the creature to leap out of the screen at any moment. But it just continues its slow, mysterious movements in the water. Eventually, I snap out of it and start thinking about what I should do next. Who should I tell? Should I tell anyone at all? I definitely don't want to be seen as someone who believes in wild stories, but this is real. For a long time after capturing the footage, I keep it to myself. I go about my daily routines, but thoughts of that creature linger in my mind. It bothers me so much that I have trouble sleeping, often having dreams where I'm back on those rocky shores. In these dreams, the creature doesn't just swim away. Sometimes it comes ashore, its body transforming and stretching until it looms over me. I always wake up just as it reaches out towards me. As days turn into weeks, the weight of this secret becomes heavier. I consider going to the authorities, but how would I explain it? Hey, I found a sea monster. Want to take a look? I can almost hear the laughter and disbelief. Besides, I worry they might take my footage and I'd be left with nothing. Instead, I turn to the internet for answers. I spend nights delving into marine biology forums and reading about cryptozoology. I stumble upon stories of sightings along the Bay of Fundy dating back centuries, tales of something called the Digby Dragon. While none of these stories exactly match what I saw, they're close enough to convince me that others might have encountered this creature too. I even reach out to some anonymous posters, asking if they've seen anything like what my drone captured. The responses vary from skepticism to excitement, but no one provides solid evidence. It's all blurry photos and hearsay, nothing like the clear HD footage I possess. It feels like I'm piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces. There's a thrill in uncovering clues, but it's also lonely. I can't share my discovery with anyone else. It's just me and my computer screen, and that mysterious creature. I continue using the drone for work, always half expecting to spot the creature again. Yet it never reappears, and I'm unsure if I'm relieved or disappointed. It's a strange feeling, wanting to come face to face with something that scared me. But I suppose that's human curiosity. We're drawn to the unknown. So here I am now, still holding on to the footage, still filled with questions, and still uncertain about what to do next. I don't know if I'm ready to reveal it to the world just yet. I was working for the United States Forest Service in the Blood Mountain Wilderness, a wild place in Georgia where part of the Appalachian Trail winds through. It's known for its rugged terrain, and we take good care of it for visitors. We have lots of black bears here, so we always worry about their safety and ours. One night in the late 90s, we got reports of bears bothering campers, even though everyone was doing things right. I decided to patrol at night to see if I could find the bear causing trouble. As I drove along one of the park roads, I spotted movement in the ditch. It looked like a bear's shape, fixated on something down there. I used my spotlight to see better. I couldn't see its face, just its back, but it seemed to be eating something that looked like a deer carcass, though I couldn't be sure from where I was. I stayed in my truck but rolled down the window and tried to scare it away. Bears can get aggressive around food, and there were campers nearby. I shouted, honked the horn, and waved my light, but the animal didn't seem to notice or care. In my truck, I had a signal flare. I lit it and threw it towards what I thought was a big black bear. The flare hit its back, and finally it turned around. That's when I saw it wasn't a bear at all. It was a wolf. A huge black wolf. This wolf was as big as a full-grown black bear, maybe even bigger. Its eyes were yellowish amber, and its teeth looked too large for its mouth, like those ancient creatures you read about. I must have made it mad because it stared right at me through the window. I honked again, but the wolf didn't care. I quickly rolled up my window thinking it would come closer, but instead, it walked right in front of my truck. If I thought the wolf was big before, it was gigantic now, standing like it dared me to hit it. It would have been like hitting an elk. My truck couldn't handle that, and I think the wolf knew it. I had to get out of there, but the wolf blocked the road. I reversed as fast as I could, watching it in my mirror the whole time. Here's the scary part. As if seeing a giant wolf wasn't enough, in my rearview mirror, I saw it stand up on its hind legs just like a bear. Back at the ranger station, I locked myself in and called my boss. I told him about the wolf, but he thought I was tired and mistaken. It was probably just a bear or a big dog. It was frustrating because I knew what I saw wasn't a bear or a dog. Driving home that night, I was too scared to look at the forests. I was afraid I'd see that wolf again. When I got home, I couldn't sleep at all. The next morning at the ranger station, I found something terrifying. There were huge wolf footprints all around, the size of bear tracks. It had followed me back. I showed my boss, but he accused me of playing a prank. I was scared. If that wolf could follow me to the station, it could find my house too. Walls and locked doors wouldn't stop something like that if it really wanted in. I moved to a different area, closer to the city. I couldn't live with the thought of that creature nearby. I never found out what it really was, a giant wolf or something else, but it was smart. It knew I wouldn't hit it with my truck, and it followed me back to the station without me knowing. It scared me a lot, but it never tried to hurt me. If it wanted to, it had chances. I don't know what to make of it. All I know is I never want to see it again, and I won't go near Blood Mountain ever again. The house where I grew up had ghosts. Some might ask why we didn't just leave, but it wasn't that simple. My mother inherited the house from her father after he passed away. Since it was fully paid for, we only needed to cover the property taxes. We were very poor, so moving wasn't an option. In our home, there were a few unspoken rules. The most important one was never to go into the basement alone. The basement was old and musty, with only one small light and dirt floors. The only reason anyone went down there was for laundry, and even then we always went together. Strange things happened in our house. Items would disappear and turn up in odd places, and odd noises at night were common. My parents tried to hide it, but I knew the truth. Most of the time we could ignore it and get on with our lives. One day, after coming home from school, I was alone in the house. While watching cartoons, I heard a faint meowing. I muted the TV and followed the sound, which led me to the basement door. I hesitated, not wanting to go down alone, but curiosity got the best of me. I thought I might find a cat. As I descended the stairs, the meowing grew louder. At the bottom, I realized there were no windows or doors for a cat to get in. The meowing stopped, and I felt uneasy. Suddenly, I heard a laugh, and my skin prickled. Terrified, I ran up the stairs and slammed the door. I sat on the couch trying to calm down by watching TV. When my parents came home, I told them what happened. My mother was upset and made me promise never to go down there alone again. A week or two later, I was alone at home doing homework. I heard a light tapping on the basement door. It sounded like something wanted to get out. I ignored it and went to my room. Later that night, I woke up from a bad dream and went to the kitchen for water. I noticed the basement door was slightly open. My heart sank. I didn't want to pass by it, but I had to. As I walked by, I pushed it shut, but then the doorknob started to jingle. It was being turned forcefully. I jumped as banging noises came from behind the door. I saw the doorframe shake and ran to my room, hiding under the covers. The next morning, my mother scolded me for leaving the basement door open. I tried to explain, but she thought I wasn't telling the whole truth. After that, things got worse. I heard laughing in the hallway at night, light banging in the walls, and my belongings went missing or turned up broken. It seemed like something wanted me to let it out of the basement. Whatever it was seemed to focus on me. My parents believed me but didn't understand why it bothered me so much. My mother had grown up in the house but never experienced anything like this. One night I saw it. I had to use the bathroom and ran quickly. As I went back to my room, I saw a figure in the dim hall light. It was a young girl about 10 years old. She looked at me and walked into the living room as if she wanted me to follow her, but I didn't. I ran to my parents' room and woke them up. My dad checked, and the basement door was open, but there was no sign of the girl. I recently retired from my job as a park ranger with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Unexplained River Lake near Pittsburgh. My work was always interesting because I spent most of my time outside, not cooped up in an office. I loved patrolling the lake in my boat, making sure everyone was safe and that the dam was working properly. One chilly afternoon in early spring, something strange happened that I can't explain. The whole area was quiet as I finished checking the docks. Just as I was about to head back to my boat, I heard a soft sound, like leaves rustling in the wind, but it was different somehow. It was a low buzzing noise. I looked around, but there was no wind at all. Then I noticed a strange bluish haze coming from the woods nearby. It wasn't a light or smoke. It had a shape, almost like a ghost floating along. It made me feel really uneasy. I felt a strong tingling sensation all over my skin, and my hair seemed to stand up straight. Even the blue sky looked odd, like it had a shiny metallic look to it. This strange feeling lasted for a few minutes before the haze slowly drifted away. I was puzzled and wondered if I had imagined it. To make things even weirder, my fully charged cell phone suddenly had very little battery left. I started up my boat, and that's when I saw the haze form into a small ball of light right in front of me. As I cruised downstream, the light stayed right beside me like it was keeping pace with the boat. Sometimes it disappeared around corners, only to pop up again a minute later. This went on for about 10 or 15 minutes until I reached the next dock. Just when I thought the strange light show was over, the ball of light reappeared, this time closer to me. It seemed to be moving toward me slowly, almost like it was checking me out. After a while, it floated towards the trees and stayed there, like it was watching me. I couldn't resist following it, staying a safe distance away. The light was bright white with a hint of blue, like a tiny floating baseball. As we ventured deeper into the trees, it started blinking on and off, almost like it was playing a game of hide and seek. After a few rounds of blinking, it suddenly turned back into that bluish haze I had seen earlier, spreading out and vanishing near the ground. I couldn't help myself. I had to see where it had gone. I found a spot on the ground that glowed faintly in the shadows. Carefully, I picked up a clump of dirt that still had a faint glow, trying not to disturb it too much. Despite feeling strange from the static in the air, I didn't think the light meant any harm. I was more curious than scared. I wondered endlessly about what it could be. Was it some kind of electricity or maybe gases mixed together? Was it a natural thing or something from another world? I didn't have any answers. When I got back to the boat, I took the glowing dirt clump with me. But by the time I got home, it had lost all its glow. Maybe I should have let someone examine it, but the whole experience left me feeling odd.